exact reasons.
Yeah.
It was more
speculation.
Yeah, I'm speculating. Yeah. Super nice guy. One of the nicest guys I've ever met in my life, James Wan. I'm just sad I didn't meet Amber Heard to be able to recount my own experiences of talking to her. Because I met Jason Momoa. He was super nice.
Yeah, he was.
And James Wan was super cool. And everyone in Aquaman was very, very nice. She was one of the only people I didn't actually get to interact with. I didn't interact with her on set or at the premiere. Super relevant to this conversation. Mm-hmm. Anyway, moving on. Johnny Depp trial shocker. Former TMZ producer implies Amber Heard leaked Depp video.
In 2016, what did you do for a living?
I worked as the field assignment manager at TMZ.
And what were your responsibilities as a field assignment manager for TMZ?
I was the go-between the news desk in the office and the reporters in the field, which you might know as paparazzi.
And what were your responsibilities specifically as to the paparazzi?
It would be to dispatch paparazzi to various locations based on tips or direction dictated by having a list of sort of hotspots where celebrities would be.
And how were those tips received?
They were received either through tips that we received through our tip line or directly through news producers in the office.
And were tips frequently received directly from sources?
Very often the case, yeah.
And who were the type of sources that TMZ received tips from?
They would receive tips from, oftentimes it would be publicists, managers, agents, or B-list celebrities.
B-list celebrities. Lawyers?
And lawyers, definitely.
How are tips verified?
Tips are verified by an extensive process. If they come in through our tip line, we have to verify who sent it, that the source is truthful, and so they have to add their contact information, which is a field in that on that website for like name, phone number, things like that.
And how long did that process typically take?
If we receive a tip through the tip line, it could take a while because that would need to be, if it was a tip, we would need to verify it. If it was media, such as photos or videos, that would need to be extensively verified to ensure that the person sending it is a copyright holder and that we would have the legal ability to air it and distribute it.
And while working for TMZ, were you involved in any assignments related to Ms. Heard?
I was.
Oh boy.
What was the first time you recall working on an assignment related to Ms. Heard?
I believe it was May 27th, 2016.
And what was your role in that assignment?
For that, Ms. Heard was filing a restraining order at a courthouse in downtown Los Angeles. So I dispatched camera people to that location.
Oh. Under what circumstances would you normally send paparazzi to a courthouse?
Only if we had been informed prior. It's not by any means a celebrity hotspot. We would only ever send people there if we had been tipped off that something was occurring and there was somebody present there.
And what footage was TMZ trying to capture at the LA courthouse on May 27th, 2016?
We were trying to capture Amber leaving the courthouse and an alleged bruise on the right side of her face.
What was your team of paparazzi supposed to do while they were at the LA courthouse on May 27th, 2016?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay and foundation. What were they supposed to do? Right. She's asking for, I don't think there's a foundation. I'll overrule the objection at this point. Proceed.
I'm not a lawyer, but I was even confused by the objection. I'm like, I don't understand what you're doing.
What's going on?
I'm very confused by this objection.
Stop talking! Go ahead, Mr. Tremaine.
Can you say the question again?
What was your team of paparazzi supposed to do while they were at the Los Angeles courthouse on May 27th, 2016?
Their objective was to capture her leaving the courthouse, and then she was going to sort of stop and turn towards the camera to display the bruise on the right side of her face.
Oh, wow.
Did your team of videographers get the shot of Amber Heard?
We did.
Yeah, you did.
What is the difference between receiving a tip from a news producer and any other source?
If it's any other source, it would have to be verified by copyright. If it was anything that was received directly through a news producer, then they go through that process to verify the source.
Did you do anything to verify the tip on May 27th, 2016 related to Amber Heard?
I did not.
Why not?
Because it had come directly from a news producer.
Does that mean it had been verified?
It means that they had verified that tip and deemed that it was credible, and therefore a camera person needed to be dispatched.
After May 27, 2016, were you involved in any other assignments related to Amber Heard?
Yes.
Can you tell me about those assignments?
The next one would have been August 6th, 2016, where she was giving a deposition.
Hold on. So the implication is quite strong here that she tipped them off herself, right?
If not Amber Heard, then someone from her team, because he's saying like
she was supposed to turn the camera, like that was already planned, that she was gonna look at the camera and like reveal that.
Apparently, yes, that's what he said. So like, yeah, they were tipped off by either her or someone close to her in her team, that they felt confident enough that this was a strong enough tip that they could act on it. Because I imagine they get a lot of calls from like randos in Hollywood going like,
completely
I
goes
see this person
yeah.
doing this thing.
Certainly,
you know?
this completely goes against her statement,
Yeah.
her testimony.
So what did you do in relation to that tip?
I dispatched camera people to a parking lot adjacent to a law office in which she would be arriving to, so we could get the footage of her arriving for the deposition.
Do you typically send paparazzis to parking lots of law offices?
No, not at all.
Did you get the shot of Ms. Heard on August 6, 2016?
We did.
After August 6, 2016, were you involved in any other stories involving Ms. Heard?
Yes, I was.
And what story was that?
On the 12th, we received a video depicting Johnny Depp slamming some cabinets that was captured by Ms. Heard.
And what day was that?
I believe that was the August 12th
Of
of
2016?
2016, yes.
Can you describe to the jury how you received the video on August 12, 2016?
Yes, the video was sent in through our email tip line, which is an email distribution that goes to all the producers and to myself as the field assignment manager, because it often included celebrity locations. It came in as I recall,
Objection, hearsay.
He's just describing how
Yeah.
it came in.
I think he's about to reveal hearsay, Your Honor.
I'll overrule for now. We'll see what.
It's not hearsay until he says it.
Continue.
So I received that email and it included a link from some unknown Dropbox type public website in which it contained that
Objection, Your Honor,
video.
hearsay. He's about to describe what comes from the Dropbox website. Sorry, just please.
This is late for the trial. We'll see the next question. Go ahead, next question.
Said you received a link.
The judge is like, I'm damn curious. You shut up, lawyer. I'm curious.
Yeah.
I gotta know.
Let the man speak.
It's the
This
good
is
shit.
important.
This is good shit. Shut the fuck up. You keep everything in the story. Put your ass down. I'm sorry to make jokes. I'm sorry. It just.
Well, even he, I feel like he's very well prepared.
Yeah.
You know, he came on here, Camille's asking him, like, when did this happen? August 12th. Like, dang, okay,
Yeah.
someone did their homework.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know if maybe he's done this sort of thing before, or he
Well,
just...
TMZ people also go on camera, so, I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so, you know, he knows what he's talking about. Maybe he knows a thing or two, and he tried extra hard not to do hearsay.
So you received a link. What was in that link?
In that link was the video of Johnny Depp smashing the cabinets.
And you received this video in your inbox, correct?
I did.
What did you do once you received that video?
We downloaded it. We alerted the web editor who was sitting next to me at the time. We downloaded it, and then were instructed by the news producer to do what we call slap bumpers and a bug on it, which is putting the dun 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 at the beginning end, and then putting a translucent watermark over it, which indicates copyright ownership.
Wow.
After you did that, was it posted?
It was posted, yes.
Where was it posted?
It was posted to tmz.com.
Did you do anything else related to Amber Heard on August 12, 2016?
Yes, I received a tip that Amber Heard would be arriving at LAX And so I dispatched camera people to film that exit.
He didn't say what that, I mean, he doesn't know where that video came from. I mean, it's entirely possible that Amber Heard shared that with someone in her circle, and then that went to TMZ from someone in her circle.
Yeah, because I thought he was talking about how they had to verify copyright on that, and he didn't talk about that in this instance. Like, how do you verify if the person who sent that picture or that video is actually the owner of that copyright, you know?
Yeah.
Her arrival to LAX, rather.
And why did you do that?
I was instructed to.
How long does it take to post a story after media's been received by TMZ?
After media's been received, it could take any length of time depending on who owns the copyright.
How does TMZ obtain copyright over images and videos?
The only way to obtain copyright over media would be if we shot it ourselves, if it was sent to the tip line, source verified that it was from the original copyright owner, and then either purchased from that person or given to us. And then the third option would be if it was directly given to us by the copyright holder, like a direct source.
And how long does it take to copyright something TMZ has received through the tip line?
It can take a while because you have to extensively verify that that person owns the copyright. And then possibly, it depends also if you can even get in contact with the person because they might not be super responsive immediately via phone or email that they provided. And then potentially you'd have to enter a negotiation with our clips and clearances department to figure out the cost of that media.
How long does it take for TMZ to obtain a copyright or something received directly from a source?
Something in the realm of 15 minutes just to do what I described before, which is putting bumpers and a bug on something and write the article and post it pretty fast.
How much time had passed from the time you received the kitchen cabinet video to the time it was posted on TMZ?
About 15 minutes.
Wow.
Jesus.
Did any other tabloids other than TMZ post this video?
No, the lady named calls for hearsay.
Did any other tabloids?
Yeah.
Mr. Tremaine, go ahead.
No, they did not.
And why not?
Because it was a TMZ exclusive.
And what does that mean?
It means the TMZ owns the copyright to it. So it can't be distributed by any other media source without backlinking to TMZ, and they wouldn't be able to upload that media without getting a copyright strike.
Have you seen the kitchen cabinet video that was played in this trial?
I have, yes.
How does that video that was played in this trial compare to the one you received on August 12, 2016?
When I had clicked the direct link that we received and watched the video in its entirety, it was much shorter than the video we had received, than the video that's been played in this trial. There was a bit at the beginning that was played here in which Ms. Heard is seemingly sort of sitting at the camera and getting into position. And then there's a bit at the end where she's seemingly sniggering and looks at the camera. That part was not present in what we received.
Did TMZ edit the video?
No, not even a little.
Wow.
When we receive something and it's edited, there's a clear indicator because there's sort of a journalistic practice that uses when there's an edit, you do what's called like a white flash transition, which covers the entire screen with white to very clearly indicate to everybody there was an edit here for time or whatever, just to make it a little more compelling. But in this case, it was not edited, as I was staring at the machine that edited it and present for the entirety of receipt to publishing.
When was the next time you worked on an assignment related to Amber Heard?
It was, there was the time where we went to the airport. And then the day after that, because she had flown in for the deposition, because I think the first time didn't work out. So she was arriving again for the deposition in that same parking lot adjacent to a law office.
And what's that, August 13th, 2016?
That was August 13th, yeah.
And what was your assignment on August 13th, 2016?
To dispatch camera people to that parking lot at a specific time in order to film Amber Heard arriving for the deposition.
While you worked at TMZ, did you ever receive any communications from Mr. Depp or his camp?
I did not.
I guess he doesn't work for TMZ now, but why would he come forward now after having been involved in creating that narrative? Does he feel guilty?
He might have been subpoenaed.
Fair enough.
Even if she asked that question, the Amber Heard's team might have stepped in and said, objection, something. What is evident from all the clips we've watched so far is that there is a lot of misdirection being employed here. At least that's what it seems.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misdirection. There's a lot of fake evidence. Definitely a possibility of perjury.
Strong possibility, I would argue.
As I've said before, and as behavioral arts has said a few times, it's not looking good for Amber Heard.
No.
It's really not looking good for her. The TMZ thing is one of the biggest ones, because she said straight up, I did not inform TMZ. And then she's like, oh, I informed TMZ and did the thing where,
Yeah.
the giveaway, the tell that she kind of messed up. And then coupled with this, it's like, yo, it looks like you informed TMZ. It looks like you gave that information to TMZ each and every single time.
Right, because according to him, it seems like they have very stringent practices on how they verify sources. And if they were able to just put a bumper and watermarks or whatever on that right away, then it means that, like, either someone was paid or someone was like, take it, it's yours.
He wasn't straight up asked, did Amber Heard send these to you? And I guess that maybe he doesn't know, or maybe he's not allowed to say. Maybe there's like some kind of contractual obligation to not say.
Right.
You know, maybe you got to keep that anonymous. That was a really good witness.
Yeah.
That was a really, really good witness. That coupled with Kate Moss, did he ever push you down any stairs? Ever.
In the history of time, ever.
All right, guys, what do you think? I mean, it seems pretty convincing. Me being the skeptic that I am, being as objective as I am, it's welcome, folks. I'm Jabby Kuwait, joined by Char Kirk. Welcome, folks. I'm Jabby Kuwait, joined by Char Kirk.
What's up?
I don't know how many people are actually interested in watching these, but we're going to watch it. E.T. has the highlights of the closing statements from Johnny Depp's team and from Amber Heard's team. In addition to that, I noticed that Asmongold Clips posted a short clip titled Amber Heard Lawyer Goes All Out. And I clicked on it just to see kind of what it was about, and I was like, oh, that actually looks like something that I would be interested in looking at with you guys. And so I found the contextual clip, and so that we can watch more of it than was actually available on Asmongold Clips. So we'll be watching both the ET highlights and then, what of that, because I'm sure it won't be included in the highlights because it's got profanity in it. So if you guys want to just skip around, there are timestamps in the description below. You can also just scroll your playhead forward and it'll tell you, what's what. Based on the Law and Crime Network YouTube videos, I think that people are most interested in seeing Camille Vasquez's closing argument, so we'll kick things off with that.
Ms. Heard walked into a courthouse in Los Angeles, California, to get a no-notice ex-parte restraining order against Mr. Depp, and in doing so, ruined his life by falsely telling the world that she was a survivor of domestic abuse at the hands of Mr. Depp. Today, on May 27th, 2022, exactly 6 years later, we ask you to give Mr. Depp his life back by telling the world that Mr. Depp is not the abuser Ms. Heard said he is, and hold Ms. Heard accountable for her lies. Now it's time for you, the jury, to come to a decision. You have been entrusted with a serious task. What is at stake in this trial is a man's good name. Even more than that, what is at stake at this trial is a man's life. The life that he lost when he was accused of a heinous crime, and the life he could live when he is finally vindicated. Exactly 6 years ago today, on May 27th, 2016, Ms. Heard walked into court and filed a false report of domestic abuse against her husband of 15 months, Johnny Depp. The scene was a setup. She tipped off the paparazzi so they would be waiting. They knew exactly where she would pause, which side of her face to photograph. And the photos captured what she wanted them to see, the image of a battered woman. What the paparazzi did not know is that the dark mark on her face mysteriously appeared 6 days after last seeing Mr. Depp. It was a lie. She knew it, Mr. Depp knew it, and the multiple witnesses you heard from who saw her that week of May 21st, 2016, also knew it. But the world only saw what she wanted them to see. 2 years later, when promoting the biggest role of her career, until this trial, Ms. Heard presented herself to the world as a public figure representing domestic abuse. The headline of the op-ed featured the term sexual violence. even though she had never before accused her ex-husband of such a heinous crime. Ms. Heard and her lawyers love to remind you of how the op-ed did not mention Mr. Depp by name. But Ms. Heard made sure that there would be no mistake about who she was referring to. She inserted 2 years ago, so the world would remember the photo of a battered woman, the mark on her face, standing outside the courthouse, and they would once again see Mr. Depp as the villain, this time in full swing of the Me Too movement. But what was happening behind closed doors was quite different from what Ms. Heard presented to the world. The exact opposite, in fact. There is an abuser in this courtroom, but it is not Mr. Depp.
You know what I find fascinating? Being reminded of how short the marriage was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how long they were together before they got married, but like after 15 months, and then how many years of this nonsense that followed.
He's had so many long-term relationships before,
Yeah.
you know, like he was with Vanessa Paradis for like years, and then this one's like 15 months, and probably legitimately the worst relationship he's ever had.
And there is a victim of domestic abuse in this courtroom, but it is not Ms. Heard. The evidence presented at this trial has shown that Ms. Heard is in fact the abuser, and Mr. Depp the abused. As you heard from Mr. Depp and multiple other witnesses that testified under oath at this trial, Mr. Depp experienced persistent verbal, physical, and emotional abuse by Ms. Heard during their relationship. You heard from Mr. Depp about how often Ms. Heard would berate him, insult him, and physically attack him, including one of the most serious occasions when Ms. Heard threw a vodka bottle at Mr. Depp, severely injuring his finger, and then put a cigarette out on his face.
Oh, I didn't hear that one.
I didn't hear that either.
You heard from Mr. Depp that this whole incident in Australia started because Ms. Heard was enraged that Mr. Depp wanted a post-nuptial agreement, and she wasn't in his will, just a month after getting married. You also heard from Tara Roberts, a manager at Mr. Depp's island, who witnessed Ms. Heard telling Mr. Depp that he was washed up and would die fat and lonely. You also heard from Ms. Roberts that she witnessed Ms. Heard clawing and grabbing at Mr. Depp, grabbing his hair, trying to pull him back to her, and Mr. Depp had a visible injury to his nose on that occasion. Most importantly, you heard from Ms. Heard herself, on multiple audio recordings, admitting to being physically violent with Mr. Depp. What you didn't hear on a single recording you heard in this case, and there were many played by both parties, is Mr. Depp ever admitting to hitting, punching, or kicking Ms. Heard. You didn't hear it. It doesn't exist. It didn't happen. And despite the fact that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard are heard discussing many of the alleged incidents you've heard about at this trial, like Australia and the Bahamas, you never heard Ms. Heard accuse Mr. Depp of sexual assault. Unlike Mr. Depp, who you heard admit to and own up to his past mistakes and his struggles, particularly with drugs and alcohol, Ms. Heard will not admit that she has ever done anything wrong. But she cannot deny what you heard on those recordings. As much as Ms. Heard and her lawyers have tried to make this case about Mr. Depp's language, it is Ms. Heard that repeatedly admits to violence. When you catch Ms. Heard in a lie, she tries to cover it up with more lies. So let's talk about the giant lie at the heart of this case. Ms. Heard's claim that Mr. Depp is an abusive monster and that she is a public figure representing domestic abuse. She spun a story of shocking, overwhelming, brutal abuse. She came into this courtroom prepared to give the performance of her life, and she gave it. Ms. Heard's acting coach, Christina Sexton, testified that Ms. Heard has difficulty crying when she is acting. You saw it. Ms. Heard sobbing without tears, while spinning elaborate, exaggerated, fantastical accounts of abuse, and everything going on in her mind almost a decade prior while enduring that abuse. It was a performance. What we have is a mountain of unproven allegations that are wild, over the top, and implausible. And you can't pick and choose which of these wild allegations to believe and which ones to disregard. You either believe all of it or none of it. Either Mr. Depp sexually assaulted Ms. Heard with a bottle in Australia, or Ms. Heard got up on that stand, in front of all of you and made up that horrific tale of abuse. Either she's a victim of truly horrific abuse, or she is a woman who is willing to say absolutely can't. But this case doesn't come down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp. This case comes down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp, Christy Dombrowski, Sean Bett, Malcolm Connolly, Travis McGivern, Starling Jenkins, Keenan Wyatt, Dr. Kipper, nurses Debbie Lloyd and Erin Filati, Tara Roberts, Ben King, Kate James, Kate Moss, Dr. Colbert, Morgan Knight, Morgan Tremaine, Officers Melissa Sines, Officers Tyler Haddon, Officer William Gatlin, and Beverly Leonard.
Damn. Like, God. That's...
I mean, she's presenting like really strong arguments. Randomly this morning, I came across a video of Johnny Depp going to a children's hospital dressed as Jack Sparrow and talking to these sick children, and I was like, a good guy does that.
Yeah.
That supports his like good character in my book.
What Ms. Heard testified to in this courtroom is the story of far too many women. But the overwhelming evidence and weight of that evidence shows that it's not her story. It's not Ms. Heard's story. It was an act of profound cruelty, not just to Mr. Depp, but to true survivors of domestic abuse.
Yes.
For Ms. Heard to hold herself out as a public figure representing domestic abuse. It was false, it was defamatory, and it caused irreparable harm. And to talk more about that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and my friend, Mr. Chu.
As Ms. Vasquez said, you have now come to know the real Amber Heard. Scary. We also told you at the start of this trial that you were going to come to know the real Johnny Depp. Nothing. The many characters you see him play so wonderful in the movies. But the man himself, we kept that promise. You've met the real Johnny Depp.
Did you catch that?
Yeah. Her smile.
What does that mean? That could be one of two things.
Yeah.
My theory is either A, she thought it was funny that he decided to emphasize in the movies so as to appeal to the jurors, like, or in the movies, you know, the Johnny Depp that you know, like, he's the famous guy, the narrative of the powerful man, right? Or she's still obsessed with him.
Yeah, it was kind of hard to tell because initially when she turned away and she had that little smile or that little smirk, I was projecting onto her this sense of
Superiority?
Yeah, like,
Okay.
ugh. But then the way when she turned around, her smile actually looked quite warm and
That's the thing I'm
loving.
saying.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it is a little bit confusing.
Himself.
That.
Yeah.
Unless there was an exchange of some kind that we didn't notice.
The many characters you've seen him play so wonderfully in the movies. But the man himself, we kept that promise.
Yeah. I don't know. That's
You
weird.
met the real Johnny Depp. Before Amber Heard, ladies and gentlemen, no woman ever before Amber Heard ever claimed that Mr. Depp raped and abused her in his 58 years. And no other woman since Ms. Heard made that false claim back on May 27th, 2016, and repeated it in her December 2018 op-ed. Has any woman come forward since? This is Me Too without any Me Too. To the contrary, ladies and gentlemen, you heard Kate Moss 2 days ago testify. This is a woman who has never testified in any proceeding, ever. A very private person. Testified that Mr. Depp never abused her, and that Ms. Heard lied to you. And she lied to you twice. Beyond the personal and emotional effects of Ms. Heard's lies, their impact on Mr. Depp and his family, the damage she inflicted on his reputation and career is undeniable. There's an old saying that a good reputation takes a lifetime to build, but only a second to destroy. Mr. Depp spent in fact, a lifetime building his reputation as one of the greatest actors and movie stars of his generation, an iconic figure respected and liked throughout Hollywood and recognized and admired throughout the world. As you heard in this case, Amber Heard is not a true victim, and Mr. Depp certainly is not an abuser. Again, nobody has come out of the woodwork to say Me Too. This is the unique and singular Me Too case where there's not a single Me Too.
You know what?
Depp's name will be forever tarnished by these horrendous and false allegations.
He makes a really good point. Usually when one person comes out and says, this happens to me, so-and-so.
Like Bill Cosby.
Yeah, Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, whatever. Then other people feel more courageous. They feel empowered to come out and go, yeah, that happened to me too. But in this case, it's only the one person.
I do believe that's because he has no history of this.
Yeah.
The conspiratorial part of my brain goes, he's very wealthy, and he could have paid those people to just keep quiet.
There is that. Or the number 3 option is he's only ever done this once.
And the truth about what really happened, which you've now heard. It is about restoring his lost reputation. It's about showing Mr. Depp's children, Lily Rose and Jack, that the truth is worth fighting for. It is. And it's about restoring Mr. Depp's name and standing in the community to the fullest extent that you can. And you can do something. And only you, ladies and gentlemen, can do that for him. You heard from Mr. Depp yesterday that he has been carrying these outlandish, outrageous stories on his back, pretty stoically, and living with them for 6 years, and waiting to be able to bring his truth out. And he has told you the truth, the unvarnished truth, even truth that pretty embarrassing. He knew that was going to happen when he brought this case. You've seen the evidence in this case over 6 long weeks, which we again thank you for. That evidence shows overwhelmingly that Ms. Heard's attempt to paint herself as a heroic survivor, an innocent survivor, and Mr. Depp as a terrifying abuser are utterly false. We ask you to please return your verdict for Mr. Depp. We ask you, we implore you to give him his name, his reputation, and his career back. Thank you.
He feels like the Tim Cook of that team. Like, Tim Cook is the head person. He's the head person of Apple, but he's never been like the greatest spokesperson. I mean, he's improved over the years, but if you watch like his early days of being the head of Apple, it just was like he had marbles in his mouth. He was always screwing up. They always needed to bring on the other people on stage from Apple to do the talking because they were just so much better. To have that follow Camille Vasquez, I'm just like, yo, like, you need to go to study where she studied on how to speak because she just murdered that shit. And he comes on, he's like, he can't even remember the dates and stuff. Like, I'm like, this is the closing arguments.
No.
Get the dates right, bro.
I thought that they both presented very strong
The information was strong.
Yeah.
The information was on point. It's just like, the presentation does, like, it has an impact.
Yeah, but I think they were also speaking, like, from the heart as well. You know, they were imploring the jury, like, please, help this man. You know, because you know he's telling the truth, and you know that Amber Heard is lying, so please, please.
I would have thought if they were truly speaking from the heart, they would...
To tell you...
Ms. Heard walked into a courthouse in Los Angeles, California, to get a no-notice ex-parte restraining order against Mr. Depp. And in doing so, ruined his life by falsely telling the world that she was a survivor of domestic abuse at the hands of Mr. Depp. Today,
That's one way to say it.
on May 27th, 2022, exactly 6 years later, we ask you to give Mr. Depp his life back by telling the world that Mr. Depp is not the abuser Ms. Heard said he is, and hold Ms. Heard accountable for her lies.
I like
Ladies and
that.
gentlemen of the jury, as you probably know by now, my name is Camille Vasquez. On behalf of Mr. Depp and all my colleagues at Brown Rednick, I want to thank you deeply for your time and your service over these last 7 weeks.
That'd be a pain in the
We
ass.
understand that it probably has not been convenient for you to be here every day, and we are so grateful for your time
Same.
and careful consideration. of the evidence as you deliberate. After weeks of sitting in this courtroom, listening to testimony and looking at evidence, now it's time for you, the jury, to come to a decision. You have been entrusted with a serious task. What is at stake in this trial is a man's good name. Even more than that, what is at stake at this trial is a man's life. The life that he lost when he was accused of a heinous crime, and the life he could live when he is finally vindicated.
Yeah, for real.
Exactly 6 years ago today, on May 27th, 2016, Ms. Heard walked into court and filed a false report of domestic abuse against her husband of 15 months, Johnny Depp. The scene was a setup. She tipped off the paparazzi, so they would be waiting. They knew exactly where she would pause, which side of her face to photograph. And the photos captured what she wanted them to see. The image of a battered woman. What the paparazzi did not know is that the dark mark on her face mysteriously appeared 6 days after last seeing Mr. Depp. It was a lie. She knew it. Mr. Depp knew it.
Everybody knew
And
it.
the multiple witnesses you heard saw her that week of May 21st, 2016, also knew it. But the world only saw what she wanted them to see.
The classic. It's a real classic. Amber Heard granted restraining order against Johnny Depp domestic violence accusations. And the People magazine article, look at that.
2 years later, when promoting the biggest role of her career, until this trial, Ms. Heard presented herself to the world as a public figure representing domestic abuse. The headline of the op-ed featured the term sexual violence, even though she had never before accused her ex-husband of such a heinous crime. Ms. Heard and her lawyers loved to remind you of how the op-ed did not mention Mr. Depp by name. But Ms. Heard made sure that there would be no mistake about who she was referring to.
That's so
She asserted
disingenuous.
2 years ago, so the world would remember the photo of a battered woman, the mark on her face, standing outside the courthouse.
Days before
And they would
Aquaman.
once again see Mr. Depp as the villain, this time in full swing of the Me Too movement. But what was happening behind closed doors was quite different from what Ms. Heard presented to the world. The exact opposite, in fact. There is an abuser in this courtroom, but it is not Mr. Depp. And there is a victim of domestic abuse in this courtroom, but it is not Ms. Heard. The evidence presented at this trial has shown that Ms. Heard is in fact the abuser, and Mr. Depp the abused. As you heard from Mr. Depp and multiple other witnesses that testified under oath at this trial, Mr. Depp experienced persistent verbal, physical, and emotional abuse.
And you can see it.
By Ms. Heard during their relationship.
You can
And when the
see it.
relationship was over, Ms. Heard inflicted the greatest and cruelest injury of all. She publicly and falsely named Mr. Depp the abuser. Ms. Heard never thought she would be held accountable.
Of course not.
Never thought that she would have to face her abuser.
She thought she'd get away with it.
She never thought she would have her supposed mountain of evidence vetted. She never thought that Mr. Depp would tell you, the jury, and the world that he was the real victim of domestic abuse. She said it in her own words.
Follow the wind.
I'm victim to that time, and I know it's verified. And please tell me people believe or silence you.
Well, we see.
Mr. Chu and I stood before you to give you our opening statements on behalf of Mr. Depp.
We see.
During that statement, we made promises to you about what the evidence would ultimately show at the end of this trial. We've kept those promises. One of those promises we made was that you would come to understand who Ms. Heard is. That she is a deeply troubled person, violently afraid of abandonment, desperate for attention and approval. And in her relationship with Mr. Depp, she was violent, she was abusive, and she was cruel. You heard from Dr. Shannon Curry,
From the
who explained
tapes.
that Ms. Heard suffers from borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. These are disorders that are characterized by anger, sometimes uncontrollable and explosive anger, and a powerful, sometimes desperate need for attention, acceptance, or approval. Fear of abandonment is the deepest fear. A person with these disorders will suffer from dramatically fluctuating moods and can sometimes be violent and aggressive. They can also be charming and likable, but they can be incredibly manipulative and wild. An emotional roller coaster with wild swings, from idolizing the partner to valuing him. In fact, we saw that. She completed testing with her own forensic psychology expert, Dr. Dawn Hughes. Ms. Heard self-reported that she had 3 or 4 different personalities, and that sometimes her temper would explode and she'd completely lose control. You heard from multiple witnesses that Ms. Heard can be very pleasant, even charming. But you also heard from multiple witnesses, and in audio recordings of Ms. Heard, that she can be incredibly aggressive, violent, and cruel. You heard that even from her former assistant, Kate James. Ms. James testified that Ms. Heard would scream, yell, send her barrages and text messages. In fact, Ms. James testified that Ms. Heard literally spat at her.
The fuck? This is a federal
that Ms. Heard once hit her when Ms. Pennington did not do her best to meet Ms. Heard's needs.
What the fuck?
You also heard from Beverly Leonard that she once witnessed Ms. Heard assault her then partner in Seattle Airport in 2009.
That's right, we did see that.
And you heard from Mr. Depp that Ms. Heard used her sister Whitney as a punching bag, literally and figuratively. You also heard overwhelming evidence from Mr. Depp and the people that were around him and Ms. Heard during their relationship that Mr. Depp suffered consistent verbal and physical abuse at the hands of Ms. Heard. You've heard evidence from Dr. Curry and the fact at the trial that Ms. Heard's deepest fear is one of abandonment. Being left by Mr. Depp. Mr. Depp's greatest crime in her mind. The fault she confronts him time and time again that he split. He leaves the fight, especially when Ms. Heard gets hit. She couldn't take it.
Climbers in the back.
Heard from Ms. Heard herself in audio recordings how upsetting it was to her and Mr. Depp.
Just to see his daughter.
Unnecessary. It's not always you're splitting because there's blows or because there's yelling or anything. You split most times when I'm still speaking in this volume and nothing has been thrown or hit or anything.
Yet. That's why you lose.
Calling him a monster for doing that. You heard from witnesses like Travis McGivern, Tara Roberts, Debbie Lloyd, that Ms. Heard would claw at Mr. Depp, walk the elevator, throw a punch on Mr. Depp, try to separate herself from the fight. And you heard from Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's couple therapist, Dr. Anderson, that Ms. Heard reported that when Mr. Depp would leave to de-escalate a fight, she would strike him to keep him there. She would rather be in fight than have him leave. You heard from Mr. Depp about how often Ms. Heard would berate him, insult him, and physically attack him, including one of the most serious occasions when Ms. Heard threw a vodka bottle at Mr. Depp, severely injuring his finger, and then put a cigarette out on his face.
What the fuck? I never heard of that.
You heard from Mr. Depp that this whole incident in Australia started because Ms. Heard was enraged that Mr. Depp wanted a post-nuptial agreement, and she wasn't in his will. Just a month after getting married.
Jesus.
When her husband was seriously injured and bleeding from a partially amputated finger, what did Ms. Heard do? She pursued him. She kept coming after him. Because that's what she does. She wouldn't stop.
This is whenever he wanted to see his daughter, I think.
In Australia, when we had the big fight where I lost the tip of my finger, at least
Smiling with the
Five
finger again.
bathrooms and 2 bedrooms I went to.
We're talking to me.
To escape the fight.
Isn't that a
You don't
coincidence?
escape the fight, you escape the solution. You escape the solution. You escape figuring it out. We cannot work it out if you run away to the bathroom every time.
Maybe you shouldn't.
You heard Mr. Depp testify. He went through something like a nervous breakdown that day. And he wrote a lot of things on mirrors and other places. Again, what did Miss Heard do as her husband was bleeding from serious injury? She wrote snarky messages right back to him.
Mm-hmm.
She denied it under oath to you, but the evidence you saw speaks for itself. You heard from Mr. Depp's security, Sean Bett, who was aware of constant arguing and bickering. He witnessed Miss Heard calling Mr. Depp names. Badass. Fuck you, Johnny. Mr. Bett testified that he saw and documented injuries on Mr. Depp. A swollen eyelid in March of 2015, cuts on his nose, scratch marks on his chin in December of 2015. And you heard from Travis McGivern, who testified that Ms. Heard called Mr. Depp names like washed up, fucking cunt, and worst of all, a fucking deadbeat dad.
That's a bit much.
Ms. Heard would take the low blows and hit him where it hurts. His children.
That's
Mr. McGivern
weird.
told you that on March 23rd, 2015, Ms. Heard threw things at Mr. Depp, spat at him, and ultimately punched him in the face, leaving him with a shiner. You heard testimony from Malcolm Connolly, another security member, who testified he saw Ms. Heard throw things at Mr. Depp. A cigarette lighter on a plane, a soda can from upstairs at the Eastern Columbia building. He never saw marks on Ms. Heard, but he saw marks on Mr. Depp.
Yep.
Scratches, bruises on his left eye, scratches on his left ear. And he took pictures documenting injuries, like this one.
Certainly looks suspicious. It's the tapes that are the most damning to
You
me.
also heard from Tara Roberts, a manager at Mr. Depp's island, who witnessed Ms. Heard telling Mr. Depp that he was washed up and would die fat and lonely. You also heard from Ms. Roberts that she witnessed Ms. Heard clawing and grabbing at Mr. Depp, grabbing his hair, trying to pull him back to her. And Mr. Depp had a visible injury to his nose on that occasion.
It's a wild animal, man.
Most importantly, you heard from Ms. Heard yourselves on multiple audio recordings admitting to being physically violent with Mr. Depp. You heard Ms. Heard admit to hitting Mr. Depp.
She did. It's true.
I
You didn't mean to hit me in the head with the door, but you meant to punch me in the jaw.
I meant to hit you, and I did not do this thing with the door. I do remember I did mean to hit you.
That you didn't mean.
The door? No, God, no, I didn't.
You're punching me in the jaw.
I didn't. Okay, I'm sorry I hit you. I didn't mean to hit you, but it was in response. I just reacted in response to my foot. I just reacted.
See how she
You heard her
downplays
admit it
it?
again and claimed Mr. Depp was a baby for complaining about the abuse.
I didn't punch you, by the way. I'm sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, but I was hitting you. I was not punching you. Babe, you're not punched.
Yeah. Tell me what it feels like to be punched.
You know, even a lot of guys have been around a long time. I know.
No, when you fucking have a close.
You didn't get punched. You got hit. I'm sorry I hit you like this, but I did not punch you. I did not fucking deck you. I fucking was hitting you. I don't know what the foot motion of my actual hand was, but you're fine. I did not hurt you. I did not punch you. I was hitting you. What am I supposed to do? Do this? I'm not sitting here bitching about it, am I? You are. That's the difference between me and you. You're a fucking baby. You're such a baby! Grow the fuck up, Johnny! I did start a physical fight. Because,
yeah, wow!
You did. So you did the right thing, the big thing. You know what? You were admirable.
Yeah. Look at that.
To really think about what you just heard there.
Look at that.
Quote, I'm sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, that I was hitting you. I was not punching you. Babe, you're not punched. Imagine that was Mr. Depp saying that to Miss Heard.
He'd be in jail.
Let's play one more.
Yeah, he'd be in fucking jail if that was the case.
I'm sure she's.
I think she's so disgusting.
I'm sure she's trained. No, you're right, it's all about performance.
This is the demon.
I don't regret.
Without saying. Oh, come on. What else?
This is the exorcism.
Your life. What's your blood? Oh, no, I want to know.
Get out, you lose your job.
Not away. Go get it. Please, no other place. You're running your 15 and a half weeks. Come on, put me in a real married man. Go deal with your shit the way that a man does. Go run to the next house. Every man does. Go. Run away.
What a wild animal. What a fiend,
One
man.
of the audio recordings,
Ugh.
not the one you saw in this courtroom.
What a fiend.
What you didn't hear on a single recording you heard in this case, and there were many played by both parties,
Trying out
is
Satan.
Mr. Depp ever admitting to hitting, punching, or kicking Miss Heard.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't hear it.
No.
It doesn't exist. It didn't happen. And despite the fact that Mr. Depp and Miss Heard are heard discussing many of the alleged incidents you've heard about at this trial, like Australia and the Bahamas, you never heard Miss Heard accuse Mr. Depp of sexual assault.
Is it true?
Unlike Mr. Depp, who you heard admit to and own up to his past mistakes and his struggles, particularly with drugs and alcohol,
True.
Miss Heard will not admit that she has ever done anything wrong. But she cannot deny what you heard on those recordings. As much as Miss Heard and her
Got the
lawyers
tapes.
tried to make this case about Mr. Depp's language, it is Miss Heard that repeatedly admits to violence.
Mm-hmm.
By April and May of 2016,
In the direct context.
Mr. Depp had reached his limit. His mother was dying. His finances were a mess. And when he showed up late to Miss Heard's 30th birthday party, because a meeting with his new business manager, Edward White, had gone late, Miss Heard, of course, was not understanding. She was furious.
Of
You heard
course.
from Mr. Depp, both in this courtroom and on audio recordings, that Miss Heard punched him that evening. He left with Travis McGibbon, and the next morning he learned that someone had left feces on his bed.
Who could it be?
What? She denies responsibility, but she admitted to the prank to Starling Jenkins. You heard him testify to that effect.
Oh.
For almost a month after that, they didn't see each other. And you heard from Mr. Depp that when his mother died, on May 20th, 2016, he resolved to leave Miss Heard. He was done.
Smart guy.
And when Miss Heard learned that Mr. Depp was done, that she was really losing him,
She filed the
she
restraining
went on
order.
the attack. She filed for divorce before Mr. Depp could.
Yep.
Then, as you heard from Mr. Depp's divorce lawyer, Laura Wasser, Miss Heard sent a letter demanding financial support. And when her demands weren't met, Miss Heard struck a blow against Mr. Depp that was more damaging than any physical blow she had ever landed.
Restraining order.
When she walked into court 6 years ago today, on May 27th, 2016, to get a domestic violence restraining order against Mr. Depp. She did so in front of paparazzi, with a mark on her face.
On purpose.
The evidence presented at this trial demonstrates that Miss Heard didn't just want a divorce. She wanted to ruin him.
100.
Miss Heard denied alerting TMZ to the TRO filing in this courtroom. But you heard testimony from Morgan Tremaine that TMZ knew to go to the courthouse, knew what side of her face the alleged bruise was on, and that Miss Heard would pause. She would pause for paparazzi.
How would they know that what she would do?
That ended up splashed across newspapers and magazines. Ms. Heard testified that she did not personally give photographs of her apparent injuries to People magazine. But somehow, these pictures that she took and maintained on her devices ended up on the cover of People magazine 1 month later.
Just like TMZ magically showed up at the courthouse. Isn't that interesting? Wow. How could that possibly happen? Look at that.
In the end, she walked away with $7 million without any tax liabilities, which she said she was donating to 2 charities.
What?
The ACLU and the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles.
For attention,
The
stated by her
ACLU,
publicist.
they got less than $1 million from her. And the Children's Hospital, they got $250,000.
She said, fuck them
But that didn't
kids.
stop Ms. Heard from telling the world that she donated everything. Because remember, she wanted nothing.